Hey, this is Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, the website for fathers because dads don't always think like moms. And if you're just tuning in, Great Dad Talks is a series of weekly conversations with new and expert fathers, all with a point of view on modern parenting. And as a life coach specializing in working with new and experienced dads, I'm always curious about modern dads and how we're evolving today. And you can find more about my coaching and our other resources at GreatDad.com/coaching. And today I'm talking to Dr. Joe Martin. Welcome, Joe. And Joe he's
Hey,
got
Paul,
a great,
how you doing, brother?
he's got a great life story. I love you, the way you sum up your career. He went from rags to riches to ruin to redemption. I mean, what a life you've had. Had it all by age 30, lost it by 40, and now gaining it back in 50. And with that kind of living, you've got some expertise and some wisdom that I think goes beyond my 63 years. So I'm excited to have you.
Pleasure to be here, man.
Yeah. So Joe also he's got the #1 rated podcast for Christian men on Apple Podcasts. And there's a lot of resources there, as well as on the website. Remind me again, they're at realmenconnect.com. He's got resources as well there. So first of all, one of the things that you say on your website and in your bio is that your mission really is to help men win. And what does that mean to you when you say help men win?
Well, the way we're built, Paul, is that we as men, and you can tell just by our obsession with sports, that we love winning, man. We hate to lose.
Yeah. And
that's why we root so hard on Sundays or Saturdays, depending on what sport you like to watch. That we get so obsessed with, I just was watching recently the NBA Hall of Fame speeches. I just get entrenched with their stories about who they're thanking and all this other stuff. But we as men, we want to win. And when we don't win, we get really, really frustrated. And it gets to a point that sometimes as men, we rather not play than play and lose.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, we believe that failure is final, and it's not. But as men, when we're not winning at something, whether it be pursuing the hearts of our wives or even our children, if we don't think we can succeed at it, we tend to throw in the towel and we quit and we give up and get frustrated. So our slogan, when we say we help men win, the key is we help men win at what matters most, at what matters most, and even frustrates them the most as husbands, as fathers, as leaders in their home. And so really it's kind of like an open-ended. We help you win, but what matters most to you? And whatever that matters most to you, that's what we help you with. And we want to assume that men know that success is not just in the boardroom and in business, but more importantly, in the home. Yeah. Because what difference does it make if you're a success at work, but you're a failure at home?
Yeah,
what difference does it make if
that's not a lesson that that's not a lesson everybody knows.
Sorry, what was that, Paul?
That's not a lesson everybody knows. Not every man knows that lesson.
Oh, they'll learn it the hard way eventually, like I did. So, because you're either going to learn it now, you're going to learn it later, but you will eventually learn that you rather not succeed at work and fail at home, because when it comes down to it, and when you get to the end of your days, what you're going to be remembered most are the relationships that you built, not the businesses that you built.
So well said. So well said. I every one of my clients I've had that starts out as a business client who wants expertise, wants advice or mentorship on starting a business, starting a side hustle or whatever. It always ends up coming back to the home life and the personal life, and the business stuff takes second place when it comes right down to it. So working with men, you find that you really have to back up and talk about that home life before you can even get to what does it mean to win.
Yeah, and and men usually dictate it themselves when they come to us, whether it be through our organization or whatever they're reaching after they hear us on a podcast. Typically, these men are somewhat satisfied and they're winning at work, but they're losing at home. Mm-hmm. And they want to become the hero of their home because they're realizing that doesn't compensate for what they're doing at work, does not compensate for what's happening at home. Because no matter how you look at it, you're gonna spend most of your time around the people you love and you care about. And it's hard to even be to focus when you're at work, when you got to go home to a place that may be toxic, that maybe there's a disconnect, or it constantly reminds you where you're falling short as a man.
Yeah.
And no one wants to be constantly reminded of how far he still has to go and how difficult it could be, because he's used to winning at work. Yeah. The X's and the O's and checking the boxes, but yet he can't figure this wife out. Man, he just can't break through to that teenager and break through to their heart and get to understand them. So it does get frustrating after a while.
But that is a modern look at at masculinity though too. I mean, my father, is great guy, but he worked really hard, and we didn't have that closer relationship until I became an adult. And I don't think that wouldn't have been unfamiliar to a lot of people of my generation. But it's only been recently where there's the home life, the relationship with the kids, the relationship with the wife really takes a lot more value.
Yeah, I know. I grew up without my dad in my home. He left when I was only 2 years old.
Yeah, me too.
And so I didn't know him until I got older. But you're right. The relationship I have with my father now, we have reconciled, and we have a relationship now. But it's now that he's in his older years, and I'm older now, and I have kids now. He has grandkids, and everything's fine. And I know if he had to do it all over again, he would do a lot of things differently. Most of us would if we could. But those years you'll never get back. And it's not anything to beat yourself up over, because it's better late than never. But at the same time, if you can prevent it in the beginning by learning from guys who've been ahead of you and gone ahead of you, by all means, because these kids will get older, and not every kid is going to be like us, where we're ready to receive and reconcile. Because some kids, they hold on to that bitterness, that anger, and that hostility, and they never allow forgiveness to enter into their hearts and reconcile those relationships. So it's not even worth risking it that way.
Yeah. Well, the standards have changed too. So the expectations are, I mean, a dad 50 years ago probably could have gotten a pass, and everybody would have just said, well, he was a great provider and he worked his tail off, nice house,
right.
Or whatever. And they would have said, he did his best. And now people would say like, yeah, but he's never at the dinner table, or I didn't know him, or he never came to a football game, or, all these things that are now kind of in the expectations. So I know you've written like many on your website, you've got a lot of different rules for, basic principles of how to have a great relationship with your wife, how to have a happy home life, how to be a better man. Do you have any pithy, lists like that for your relationships with your kids? Because that's what our audience is really focused on.
Yeah, when it comes to kids, I'm sorry, what was that, Paul?
Maybe those it's the same things that are universal. Your relationship with your wife is the same as relationship with the kids.
Well, they're not exactly the same, because you have a different relationship with your wife, where it's more of there's intimacy from the standpoint of you being able to, because you're one. Yeah. And so what happens to her happens to you. We have our kids for a limited amount of time.
Oh, so
and
true.
So to me, at least from my perspective, our job is with our kids, not only to love them, but to train them up. You're not training your wife. You're loving your wife. You're loving your wife. Right. So, but with your children, you're preparing them for something, and you're preparing them to be self-sufficient. You're preparing them to be good citizens, to be servant leaders, and to support one another, to love other people. But you're loving your wife. So the relationship is a little bit different. But when it comes to working with being dads and with our kids, I told you before we came on air that my background is in education. Before I started working with men primarily and exclusively, I worked in education for over 26 years in the classroom. I taught first grade. I taught high school. I taught at the college and university level. And then I even branched out to start training teachers and training schools, districts, of how to connect with kids. And that's the key. That's what I was transitioning to, that when it comes down to being a father, it's all about connection with your kids. It's keeping the lines of communication open. You can imagine, as an educator, I've seen it all, from suicide attempts to incarceration, to drug use, to cutting, to bullying, gang banging, drug selling. I'm talking about with kids.
Yeah.
And so before I became a dad, I watched this as an educator. And of course, you're preparing yourself like, wow, when I have children, what can I learn from this? And the key that I learned, and this is just me giving insight from those who are either new fathers, and a lot of people who are already our fathers, they know this now, is that the key to all of this is, boy, you have to maintain communication with your kids. Even when they don't want to communicate with you, you still have to keep the lines of communication open, that they feel that you are a safe place for them to come to share and talk to them. And I just give you a quick example, Paul. I just got back from Florida. I tell you, I'm from Florida originally, but I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But most of my family lives in Florida. But my niece just graduated from high school, so I had to go down to Orlando to celebrate her graduation. And my son came with me, who's in college. He's a senior in college, and he's 25 years old. And it's about maybe an 7 to 8 hour drive from Chattanooga to Orlando. So you're talking about round trip, that's about 15 to 16 hours.
It's all good.
And the whole time, 15 to 16 hours, we never once turn on the radio. We never once was he on his phone. I'm on my phone. Not once in 16 hours did we talk to anybody on the phone but each other. And people, now some men will be intimidated. What in the world? How do you talk to him that long? Because the lines of communication was established when he was just a child.
Right.
And so now that he doesn't live with me anymore, we have a lot to talk about. Most time it's me getting to his world to be interested in what he's interested in. But for those who are out there listening, thinking, wow, that's cool for your son, but what about if you had a daughter? Well, my daughter, when I took a long road trip with her, Faith was about 12 years old, and I took her from Chattanooga to Pensacola. That's about another maybe 6-hour trip. We're talking about 12 hours round trip. No phone, no radio, and I talked to my daughter for about 12 hours. Now, I know it may sound intimidating to fathers out there to say, what in the world could you have talked to them about that, about them, about their world, being sincerely interested in what they love and what they enjoy? I can probably, if I had to put a time frame on the 16 hours I was with my son, Kendall, I would probably think I talked about what I'm doing and work that I'm doing, probably if I had to calculate out, maybe about an hour worth of me talking about what I'm doing.
Right.
The rest of those 15 hours are either about him or about something he's interested in, or talking about the world in general and our thoughts about it and our views about it. So to me, the key for dads is, I know we don't like to do it a lot, but we have to be able to communicate. And when I say communicate, it's not talking at them, it's listening to them and opening up your heart and being vulnerable, talking about your struggles, your secrets, being, not being judgmental, and be able to listen to them and give them a safe place to share.
Wise words, hard to do in the moment. I think what my experience is, ideally you start this really young. If you avoid the temptation to turn on the radio in the car when they're 2 or 3, and you don't look on your, the less you can look at your phone when you're with them, you train them then to have that expectation that later in life, they won't listen to the radio and they won't put on the headphones and they won't be doing the email all the time while you're together. And
you're absolutely right, Paul, because I think about when I started them out as children, when they first could pick up a cell phone or a tablet, that's the rule in our car. And at least in my car now, with their moms, I can't say what goes on in the car with them, but they know when they're in the car with dad, whether it's my daughter or my son, we don't listen to the radio. We don't get on our cell phones. I don't answer the phone. I don't talk on the phone. They're not expected to do it. And we talk to each other. And it's amazing the conversations you can have with your kids if you just stay engaged. Now, understand, they're still going to like social media, all the electronic gadgets, but when they're with you, they should feel, wow, I really get to express myself. Because think about, most people would not listen to them except their own friends. And that's why I always tell parents is, this is a scary truth that I learned as an educator. Children will listen to those who listen to them. Now that sounds normal, but that's not really wisdom. They will listen to anybody who listens to them. So they'll listen to a crazy person if a crazy person will listen to them. That's why they listen to their friends who have no life experience, making a lot of mistakes, because their friends allow them to dump on them. And so they'll listen to anybody who listens to them. So if anything, do less talking to your kids and more listening to your kids. And how do you get to the listening? Ask a lot of questions. Become masterful at asking questions. One reason I'm able to talk to my kids so long, because I treat it like I'm doing a podcast interview. I got a million questions I can ask them, and I dig deeper into their hearts. Why do you think that? Why do you believe that? What makes you think that? I'm always asking questions, and they don't even catch on. They just like talking about themselves.
I think what I hear from some dads, like, my son came in the house and like always, I just said, "How's your day?" And he said, "Nah," and he left the room. But that's not a question. That's not the kind of question you're talking about. You're talking about a question like, "Hey, I know you had that, that algebra test today. How'd that go? Or I know you're trying out for the team, or I know you're in the the it requires some,
some savvy and wisdom. Paul, I'll give you a great example. I'll give you something, a simple tweak. And they're like, what's the difference? It's a huge difference. Let's go because I do this with my kids when they were in school. They would get in the car and I'll pick them up from school and we start our conversation. Here's what most parents ask their kids: how was school today? Now, it sounds like a simple question. Joe, that's a good question to ask. No, don't ask that question. See, if you ask them, how was school today? It was all right. It was all right. It was okay. Now I'm going to ask the same question, but in a different way. Watch it. Same question, but a different way. When they get in the car, what was good about school today?
Right. Right.
Well, did you just ask the same question? Yes, but no. You ask, how was school today? That they're going to say, all right, what was good about it? Well, it wasn't good. What was bad about it? What made it so bad? Tell me more. What happened when that happened?
Right.
See, so even asking that question that way gets them, it draws the answer out of them. I never ask my kids, how was school today? Because they're like, it was okay. But if I ask them what was good, no, nothing was good about it. Well, then tell me what was bad about it. So even their short answers introduces another question.
Yeah.
But when they tell you it's all right, what can you say after that? It was okay.
Yeah.
Boring. You know what I mean? Right.
So
you got to ask open-ended questions. So just tweaking, but you're right. You have to have a little bit of savvy in doing it. But if you do it after a little while, you'll get the practice in doing it. Well, I'm going to give your men a cheat sheet real quick. I used to ask the same questions when they got in the car. And here's how the men can remember it. I used the acrostic GLAD, G-L-A-D. Okay. Any man can remember this. Now watch what I'm asking, Paul. What was good about school today? That's the G, good. Yeah. What was good about school today? Second question, what did you learn at school today? Mm-hmm. What did you learn? Mm-hmm. Here's the A. What made you angry at school today?
Oh, interesting.
And then the D is decision. Tell me about a tough decision you had to make today at school. Now, let's break down each one of those questions. What was good about school today? They can't get out of it. Even if they give me a short answer, it's going to introduce a follow-up question. What did you learn at school today? Well, my son actually tried this one day. Dad, I didn't learn anything. So I turned the car around. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going back to the school. I said, you spent 7 hours at that school today and they didn't teach you anything? Come on. He said, Dad, wait a minute. I said, you need to think faster. We getting close. We're going to get somebody fired at that school. They didn't teach you anything. And what I learned about that, by asking them what did they learn at school today, if I kept asking that question every time I pick them up from school, guess what happened when they went to school when I drop them off? I better learn something because my dad's going to ask me when I get to the car, unless he's going to turn, that fool's going to turn the car back around and go back to the school.
I love it. Now
let's go with the A. What made you angry at school today? Now, let me tell you why I asked that question, because of the violence that happens at school, the bullying and all this other stuff. Kids don't just take guns to school and start shooting kids for no reason. Stuff is built up over time. I noticed from being an educator. Yep. So what I'm doing is really doing a kind of temperature check on my kids. What's going on? What's making you angry? Now, if there's a bully, I need to know now. Let me start talking about it now so we can start processing this. What made you angry at school today? Now, I love when they tell me this. Nothing made me angry at school today. Fantastic. We can go to the next question. I'm just making sure. I'm relieved that you're not angry, because that anger now can spill over to home. Now they're being disrespectful to mom. They're being disrespectful to me. We're like, what's wrong with them? Because something made them angry at school and they're taking it out at home on their brother or their sister. But if I'm talking about it, we can process it in the car. And then the last one is D. Tell me about a tough decision you had to make today in school. That brings out some of the greatest discussions, because now you're getting to open up by some of the challenges, peer pressure, doing the right thing, not doing the right thing. Now, with my daughter, it was a little bit different. I would ask her, what was the toughest decision you had to make today, Faith? And Faith said, I couldn't think of anything, Dad, no tough decision. So I changed the D for my daughter, and you might want to change it for your daughter. Any drama at school today? Tell me about some drama that happened at school today.
They love the drama.
And I learned to ask that question last, because if I ask that question first, I'll never get to the other question. So, but it's just practicing that. And so when they get in the car, before I even start asking the questions, they're already starting to talk. Yeah. God, Daddy, let me tell you what happened. Good happened in school today. So they start anticipating the questions. And then it got to a point that they started asking me, so Dad, what was good about your day today? Wow. And I tried, I said, nothing. Then what was it, what was so bad about it? Then they're doing the same thing to me. What did you learn today, Dad? Anything made you angry? What was the tough decisions you made? All that is building conversation and building the level of trust. So when they get older, you'll still see your grandkids one day.
No. that is really great advice. And I think, and you can start that out, even if you've been asking it the wrong way or not getting deep enough.
Just change
you can start that tomorrow. You can start that at 10 or 16 or even 20.
Yeah, just do it differently. Let's just try a different approach. Because I didn't always ask those questions. I started thinking, but being a teacher, I always wanted to know, what was it that parents are not seeing that parents need to know about? And I say they need to know they need to do a temperature check on their kids. Are they angry? They need to know about the choices that their kids are making that they have no idea. You don't know if your kid's been offered drugs. You don't know if your daughter has been, some kid is trying to have sex with your daughter. That's why I'm asking about the tough decisions. Yeah. And you want to know what they're learning. Are they just going to school, just showing up and warming up the seats, or are they actually paying attention in school?
And sometimes they'll answer those questions. If it's the first time they've been offered drugs, they might actually tell you. Whereas
right, exactly.
10 times down the road, where they're starting to get tempted, they're not going to tell you then, because then they're actually doing it. Yeah.
And I'll tell you from this teacher standpoint, one of the things I did in my classroom with my students, because we had a lot of students who will commit suicide, cutting. So one of the things I decided to do to kind of least be proactive, every day our kids would come to class, I would have them fill out this slip of paper. It was just a small slip of paper that had 1 to 10, like a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on 2 lines. It had inside, outside, and it had a box that says yes or no. And what it said on it says, how am I feeling on the inside today? 1 to 10. How am I feeling on the outside today? 1 to 10. Yes or no, I want to talk about it, or I don't want to talk about it. And I would give that to them every day. They would have to fill that out. And I told them if they fill this out every day and they didn't miss a day, I would give them extra credit on their next test, on a homework assignment, make up a grade, to give them some incentive to fill it out. Mm-hmm. And most of the kids would not tell me what's going on. But eventually, if you don't talk about it, he says, oh, I'm feeling like a 2 on the inside today, but I feel like an 8 on the outside. No, I don't want to talk about it. If you don't talk about it, it's never going to change. Yeah. So eventually what would happen, if the numbers wouldn't change, they will eventually check the box. Yes, Dr. Martin, I want to talk about it. And when, what was the strangest thing? When one kid would do it, say, I want to talk about it, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to start talking about their issues. And so I did that because I didn't want one of those kids coming shooting up the classroom. And also I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything if a kid did commit suicide, because there's nothing worse for a teacher. I know it's horrible for parents, but for teachers, when you see them every day and you spend more time with them than their own parents, and you're thinking, how did I miss this? How did I not know he was going through that she was going through that? By me doing that little thing of having to fill that paper out every single day, it changed everything in our classroom. And so I started doing that. And I didn't start out that way. I learned that the hard way after seeing bad things happen to kids at our school. I said, I got to do something different. And that's what I decided to do.
This is exactly why I wanted to have you on, Joe, is you could get this wisdom, and you've studied a lot of this, and these are really common sense type common sense advice. Now, I want to change the subject a little bit, because you and I are both in the same situation, being very recent empty nesters.
Empty nesters, man.
And I think there's some wisdom in there to give to even young dads. So young dads, don't tune out because you're talking to 2 old guys. But I think looking, with our perspective of looking back, mine are 17 and 21. Yours are 18 and 25. Maybe there's some things we'd be able to tell people. For example, that it goes by really fast. It's only 12. It's only about 12. Yes, it's only about 12 years where you've got them under your control, and after that, they start separating. I mean, but how are you dealing with empty nesting?
It's funny because I know this is going to sound crazy to guys. I'm loving it. my wife, on the other hand, my wife struggles a little bit more with it than I do. Yeah. And I guess the reason why I love it, because I've taken parenting so seriously when they were younger, that I knew that I was preparing them for this. And I hate to say it, Paul, I couldn't wait for them to get out of the house. Oh. Because I want to see now, was what I poured into them, is it going to matter now? Is it going to make a difference? Mm-hmm. I mean, spending that time with my son this past weekend in the car with him, I'm looking at him, I'm like, wow, he really is growing into a great human being. I love his character. I love his demeanor. And I miss them not being here because it's really quiet in the house. That's kind of weird. Not hearing the noise and the arguing and all this other stuff. But but I'm a different type of parent. I actually couldn't wait to see them get on their own. Yeah. To see, did this stuff work? What we did we make a difference in their life? And I want to know how they're going to respond now that they're gone. Will they continue to reach out? Or will they now say, good riddance, I'm out of Dad's house, and I don't have to deal with them anymore?
Glad questions anymore.
Because I want to know that now, because what you find out after they leave the nest is, okay, I know I love them, but do they like me? Yeah. Because they like you, they're coming back, and they'll still keep in contact.
Yeah, the end game, you want to make sure that you're still, they still want to see you.
And Paul, I think it also was easier for me because I've been self-employed so long for the last, I would say it's been 28 years I've been self-employed. Even though I worked in education, I always had, quote, a side hustle that was really my bread and butter, not my job. Even though I was working full time, really, I didn't have to work full time. My self-employment was enough. And so I've been pursuing my passion and my purpose since I was 24, and now I'm 52. Yeah. And so a lot of parents, when their kid, the children are just the center of their universe. And when the kids leave, now they don't know what they're going to do with themselves. Now I have more time to do more of what I love to do, because now I'm not worried about, oh man, I got to stop everything because my kids are home. Right. You know, I got to get dinner ready because the kids are home. You see what I mean? I got to help with homework. I don't have to worry about that. Man, I'm living a life right now. I don't have to worry about doing homework anymore. I don't have to hear about how long their days, because imagine talking to my daughter about drama. Oh my goodness, if I hear about another girl at school and this boy who's acting funny, why boys are so stupid, I don't have to deal with that stuff anymore. Now I actually can enjoy what I do now without the distraction. Yeah. And I love it. I know that's not true for every dad. I'm not
quite there yet, but I went through the whole separation thing like 5 or 6 years ago.
I prepared myself for that. I was ready for it, and I knew it was coming, and I treated the years coming up to it. Like you said, the time goes by so fast. I wasn't taking that time for granted. I mean, I squeezed everything I could out of it, and it breaks my heart to see them leave, you know, but I knew, but this is what I was preparing for. And now my wife, she's more like you, that she's kind of like, she got to talk to him every day. I was like, you don't have to talk to him every day.
My wife is very much like that. But like what I would say is that I went through that whole thing 5-6 years ago with you know, coming face to face with the fact that they'd leave. But I think we were probably on the same planes. Like, I have no regrets. I could not have spent more time with them. I could not have been a more active, involved father. So there's no use in wasting time crying about it, because it is what it is, and I couldn't have gotten more. So I'm happy. They're great. But that's, I think, the advice for dads is to don't take it for granted. You know,
don't take it for granted. No.
You can very easily get into that mindset of they'll be here tomorrow, and they'll be playing with me tomorrow, and then there's one day where they don't have as much time to play with you and or spend as much time, and it goes by really fast.
And Paul, you're absolutely right, because the thing, if anything, I would tell you the transition's been, it's the shock. And the shock isn't that they're gone, is that it went so fast. Yeah. It just didn't seem like it was going that fast when you were doing it. But you're thinking, wow, where did all that time go? And that's been the biggest adjustment for me, is dealing with the shock of how fast it went. It didn't seem like it was going fast at the time, but now it seemed like it was just a flicker, like, wow, my son is driving me around. We're going out of town, like, my daughter's driving me places. I'm like, what? I remember when, you know what I mean? So if anything, I'm more shocked by how fast it goes. But at the same time, I'm telling you right now, you know what I'm excited about? Grandkids. I can't wait for grandkids, man. I can't wait to be a grandfather.
Yeah. Well, my daughter's only 21 and my son's 17, so I could wait for a little while. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to wait because my son is not even thinking about getting married, and my daughter, she's only 18. Right. But she wants to, at least from what she tells me, she wants to have a big family. So she's my hope, is that she's going to have a lot of kids.
Yeah. Well, this has really been a fun conversation. As expected, you've got a lot to teach us, and I'd love to have you on again to talk about finding your purpose and finding your why, because I think that's a key thing. And I'm really curious as to how you teach that to kids, and I know you've got some experience in that. So let's do this again.
Most definitely, anytime, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So again, you can find your website at realmenconnect.com. You've got a video at rmcfree.com. You've got a bunch of books that I'm sure that are available on the website. Any of those that you want to mention the titles of that are recent?
Yeah, one that just came out, and it's right in time for Father's Day. I wish I could reach back and show it to you right now, but it's called Man Accomplished. Man Accomplished, 50 Challenges to Help You Become the Man that God Made You to Be. And that book just came out and already is on fire now. We've already gotten a lot of great feedback from it. And it's a great gift to give, not only to fathers and husbands, but also to your sons as well. And it's 50 challenges to get them to build relationship with other men. Yeah. Because that's what it's really about, us being in brotherhood and being connected to other men, because iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. We are here to sharpen one another. So.
Well, I think anything that gets men to think about their values, their purpose, the the development of those connections is extremely valuable, especially in this time that we're living in.
Yeah,
So,
and you mentioned about coming back to talk about purpose. It's actually in that book too. We got several. I think it's about 4 or 5 chapters on finding your purpose and accepting your purpose and living your purpose.
Yeah. Okay, this has been really great, Dr. Joe Martin, and I'm Paul Banis at GreatDad.com. And if you're interested in our coaching services for new and older dads, you can find more at GreatDad.com/coaching. And we'll see you next week.